Hey, what's up, mortals? It's Miggy Sawdust here with a new video for you. Welcome to Season 1, Episode 5 of What If Deku Had a Luck Quirk. Just wanted to greet you all by just saying, sit back and relax. You're in for a treat. Let's get started.
Where is he?
Shirt soaked in a cold sweat that ran down his panting body, Bakugo blindly ran down the hall in panic.
Where is he?
His first fight with Uraraka was already nothing more than a distant thought as the blonde teen's distress started to rise. Something was not right and it annoyed him.
Where is? There you are, man! Where have you been?
A scowl appeared on Bakugo's rigid face as he turned to glare at Kirishima and the rest who were with him. Irritation wanted to pool in the depths of his stomach when Sero took a step forward, pointing down the corridor they had come.
Bakugo, infirmary. I found Izuku in the corridor before my match, so I called Aizawa. He should be, and he's gone.
A very aggressive form of thanks echoed down the hallway from the direction in which the human grenade had run, and the friendship group let out an amused sigh. That was just how Bakugo was, after all. The tape dispenser sighed in relief since his guess was right, and the group went on with their day, chatting about how they were excited for the next match between Shinso and Todoroki. With a heart that pounded so heavily that the explosion creator could mistake his ribcage for a drum, Bakugo reached the infirmary door while trying to calm down. He couldn't do so, however, and slammed the inanimate thing out of his way while cursing under his breath. Jumping inside, his ruby eyes frantically scanned the room before landing on a familiar mop of green hair.
Bakugo, I was just about to go find you. Calm down.
Wearing a gas mask that couldn't hide the grim expression on his face, Aizawa sat a couple meters away from the luck manipulator with a stack of papers on hand. The atmosphere in the room was tense. Something was off. His friend sat up as if he was awake, but Izuku hadn't responded to the changes in the room. He was awake, but there wasn't any sign of life behind the dull eyes. Midoriya had detached himself from reality, and was showing no signs of returning.
Everything that's going to be said in this room is not going to leave this room. I will also personally see that any actions taken will be under my control. With that, Bakugo, take a seat.
The blonde quietly closed the door before taking steps closer when he found it strangely hard to breathe. It was almost as if the air was becoming colder, and Aizawa passed over another gas mask. Without question, the human grenade strapped the breathing apparatus on and took a good guess at the state of the situation. It was dire. Izuku was awake, but not here. That made his body extremely vulnerable to his surroundings, and as such, caused a set of perfectly constructed order of coincidences to protect the boy. At the moment, it seemed that all the carbon dioxide in the air had collected in the area around him, making it so that people in the room couldn't stay around for too long.
I'll get straight to the point. There's currently no signs of his mind returning to reality, and if a solution can't be found, then there'll be no choice but to take more drastic measures.
The teacher had to pause to signal Bakugo to stay calm, and carried on when the teenager sat down again.
His quirk has been passively affecting everything in his surroundings, and at the rate it's going, the longer he stays out, the more uneasy those around him will be, and
because of it, his quirk becomes more active to keep his damn body safe.
With teeth grit in frustration, the explosion creator logically tried to think of a way to avoid the worst outcome, but there wasn't a single good answer in his mind. Once again, he felt too powerless to help his friend, and it seemed that history was planning to repeat itself. Just when Midoriya had just started to break out of his shell, he was forced back in and stuck inside. He was alone, all by himself, stuck in an endless loop of his own mind where everything was deafened by the sound of silence.
Bakugo, can you tell me what happened 3 years ago?
What?
Dread gnawed at Bakugo's insides, and he could feel fear choking him, stealing his words from beneath his stifled breath as he tried to get his thoughts to work. Every time he managed to speak, only an inaudible noise escaped, leaving him open-mouthed and speechless at the situation.
Why do you know that?
Seconds that felt like days ticked by, and the homeroom teacher sighed before pulling open another case file. It seemed to be a closed case, about a fire that occurred a while back, and Bakugo was more than familiar with the incident. It was ruled an accident, as it had followed a series of coincidences, and in the end, resulted in the death of a woman in her late 30s. With the father figure nowhere to be seen and no way to contact, a family had to come forward to take the boy in. That family were the Bakugos.
Who do you think was the one who went into the burning building?
Aizawa could still remember the smell of burning flesh blocking his nostrils as he tried to pry a child away from the smoldering carcass. He had just been passing by on patrol when the nearby building was suddenly engulfed in flames. The billowing plumes of darkened ash flooding the air was unnaturally fast, and he originally suspected arsonists. But after saving the traumatized child, the underground hero knew better. Understanding the heavy emotion in his teacher's voice, Bakugo calmed down and explained what had followed the tragic events. There had been a funeral for Inko where everyone in the apartment block was made aware of. The lone mother was a good neighbor, and her kind-hearted nature made her fast friends with many of the other families there. Unfortunately, it meant that Izuku, who was still struggling to comprehend what had happened, was subjugated to the unfiltered criticism that the adults didn't put enough effort to hide.
That child must have been the one who killed her. No one's going to want to take him in. Is a child like him even allowed to live after what happened to his own mother? He's a danger to society.
Bakugo's list continued for a while, each one causing Aizawa's eyebrows to knit closer together. Things were starting to become clearer now on Izuku's personality, and knowing the reasons why somehow made it worse. The human grenade then explained how it was around this point that his younger self had gripped his mother's hand, causing Mitsuki to notice the commotion. The blonde woman then proceeded to smack every adult in the area on the head to get them to shut up before attempting to hug the little boy. But it was too late. Izuku had disappeared behind an impenetrable glass wall, and there was nothing they could do about it.
If only I could just...
Guilt consumed him as he was reminded of the first time he froze. He had noticed Izuku getting ridiculed, but was too worried about his public image to act. After all, he spent his whole life acting in a way to collect as many shallow compliments as possible, and became who he perceived as a strong person. His ideals were shaken for the first time as he was suddenly made aware that his perception of a strong person was clearly wrong. He was not strong. In fact, Katsuki Bakugo was weak. He couldn't act when he felt that he needed to, because his pride was too large, and it hurt.
But you've changed. You can stop beating yourself up over something that you can no longer change.
Aizawa tried to calm his firecracker of a student down, trying to hold back his own disgust at the adults that attended the funeral. He wished he could have been there in person to protect the elementary child's mind, but sadly, it was already in the past. The homeroom teacher explained to the blonde that despite how guilty he felt, the boy should be proud of his change. After all, he now openly cared for Izuku no matter who gave him a side-eye, and stuck by his side ever since. Even if they were pushed together by unfortunate circumstances, they were now friends who cared for each other in their own ways. The issue now is he never got any sort of therapy after the incident, and the mere mention of his family name seems to be enough to get him into that state. Bakugo nodded, explaining how Izuku would get a panic attack every time his family name was mentioned in middle school. The reason why the rebounding reaction had worsened was probable because the teen had gotten a taste of happiness, only making the sadness more bitter in contrast. A harsh knock on the door cracked through the silence that filled the room, and Bakugo opened it to find Shinso covered in ice. The general studies student had attempted to talk with the dual quirk user, despite the massive glacier produced during the first round against Sero, but Todoroki was not in the mood to talk. Apparently he had just stood there looking hurt, and sent a smaller ice blast in Shinso's direction, instantly knocking him out. Pathetic, I know. Also, I just wanted to say your match against the redhead is up soon. Just quickly interrupting today's video to let you all know that our merch store has received an update. Finally, at last, we have released our 70K merch. If you're interested in picking up some high-quality merch, the link will be in the top line of the description. I recommend hurrying. Some items are limited and will only be available for a limited time. These items are also signed by James Seifer. Link in the description below, and thank you all for 70K subscribers. Now let's get back to the video. They all turned toward the screen, and sure enough, Tokoyami had won against Mina, and now it was Bakugo's turn. The emotional blonde was still not ready to go out just yet, but he knew he had no choice as he threw the gas mask at the mind controller. He just wanted to get this sports festival done and dusted already so he could find a way to bring Izuku back. It was only when the Bringer of Silence was up and alive that the human grenade felt all his efforts hadn't gone to waste. It was already at the point that he couldn't properly concentrate because the guilt consumed him like a large, black, endless hole. Looking up, red eyes focused on the opponent before him, and Bakugo took a step back in confusion. When did he get to the stage? The wild screams from the crowd fell silent to his ears, and Bakugo could only hear a static noise in his mind. It felt like his ears were bleeding and the sunlight was shining down almost blindingly. Heat swelled from within him, and the palms of his hands felt thick with sweat. He wasn't ready to fight. Not in this state. But Mike was already done with the introductions and the crowd was waiting for midnight's starting call.
Hey, Baku bro, are you okay?
Kirishima's form fell slightly in concern for his friend when he saw the panicked expression behind the cracking mask. The human grenade was hyperventilating, and the sweat on his skin was abnormal even for him.
"Hand, begin!"
Out of panic, Bakugo rushed forward at Kirishima, wanting the day to be over already, and the opponent was only just able to harden himself in defense on time. There was clearly something wrong with the student as he moved like a feral creature, lashing out and attacking at anyone who approached him. Kirishima was confused, but went with it as he returned to a fighting stance and proceeded to run forward, charging headfirst into danger.
He really doesn't hold back, does he?
Mike was starting to feel uneasy as he watched the children fight. Aizawa had disappeared off in a panicked state, swearing under his breath, and now Bakugo was acting more violent than usual. Even Todoroki was starting to get rather passionate about the games had suddenly lost the fuse in himself, returning to just finishing everything up quickly and efficiently. He felt like his words weren't being heard, and it was an odd feeling of irony for him. Something was definitely wrong. The cheers of the deafening crowd were all rooting for Kirishima, and Bakugo continued to struggle internally for help. Eventually, the redhead was knocked out, and before Midnight could announce the blonde the winner, he had run off. The crowd didn't like how the student had not only beaten Uraraka to the ground, but another one of his classmates with feral violence. Malicious yells filled the arena, and Mike tried his best to change the tune, but with no avail. He could have probably handled it if Aizawa was there to speak up, but unfortunately the teacher in question was busy. Staggering into the corridor with his body numb from the fight, Bakugo struggled to keep his mind under control. It was like it belonged to someone else and he was being forced to watch behind a glass wall. Was this how Izuku felt? Did his friend have it worse? Was this why Izuku struggled so hard every day? He knew the answers to his own questions, and somehow it only made it worse. Todoroki and Ida were entering the stage to start their battle, and the rush Bakugo had felt was not calming down. He wasn't allowed to go back to the nurse's room as he still had to battle the winner of the current round after Tokoyami. Instead, the human firecracker stood as still as a rock in the waiting room, trying not to let the sound of seconds passing chime like a gong within himself.
Keep it under control. Keep it under control. You can do this, Katsuki. You're going to be number one.
The pep talk ended early as Todoroki won against Ida within a minute, and Tokoyami forfeited after seeing the way the blonde was letting out explosions like a cornered creature. The final fight was going to start, and Bakugo wanted to scream. There was an eternal battle already raging inside of him, and he wasn't prepared for his physical fight. Walking out into the overbearing sunlight that blinded his eyes, Bakugo could feel sweat oozing from the very pores of his face, collecting in beads before rolling ominously down his skin. Across the other side of the platform, Todoroki emerged from the shadows, his face overcast by a shadow of what seemed to be guilt, as he stood in his starting position. The human grenade mimicked the action and tried to take a fighting stance when he realized something. His vision was shaking. The air seemed too warm for him even to breathe, and Todoroki could no longer bear to watch. Breaking his stance, Dual Quirk user's face became awkward as he tried to apologize. Bakugo, I realize this is probably not an appropriate time to do this, but could you apologize to Izuku for me? His words took the blonde aback as he was not expecting them, and they also unexpectedly helped ground the human grenade. His mind was able to latch onto a single thought, rather than a jumbled mess, as he tried to figure out why Todoroki was apologizing. In reality, Shoto had been the one blinded by anger only a few matches ago, but snapped out of it when he was passing the nurse's office. He had originally wanted to go pick another fight with Izuku after the other boy had just ditched his round, taking his anger out on Sarah with an iceberg, but his fuse quickly fizzled out when he heard the commotion. He knew his own family problems were bad, and the fact that he just pushed them onto another classmate without considering his actions made him feel horrible. The consequences of his actions only seemed to amplify when he realized that his blinded anger was the one that took the first cut into Izuku's happiness, a feeling he knew all too well and he hated it. I don't care about winning anymore. I don't want to become him. And I guess I was already doing so by avoiding him. He let out a hollow laugh, lifting his left arm, and to everyone's surprise, a gentle wisp of flame flickered into existence. It wasn't threatening, and only a simple display, filled with sadness and regret from his own actions. This was so easy. What was I so scared of for all these years? I don't even need this victory to prove him wrong. I already am by using my flames for myself. He turned to Bakugo with determination in his mismatched eyes, a fist raised and flaming. It's my quirk and I'm going to do what I want with it. What's stopping you from doing what you can do? Accept it or reject it. Make a full decision. A small smirk appeared on the blonde's face before deepening into one everyone was more familiar with. A smug expression where he truly believed that if he worked harder, he would truly be the best. The giant wall between him and the world seemed to dissolve before his very eyes, giving him a sense of relief similar to breathing air after being underwater. He was gathering his thoughts properly again, and the student knew what he had to do. A giant explosion crackled out of his body as Bakugo ignited the sweat that had clung on to him. The burst of energy could almost represent the determination that grew stronger than ever, and by the time the smoke cleared all the way, Todoroki stood alone in the arena.
It seems like Bakugo has forfeited? What was that explosion then? What happened? Well, I guess Shoto Todoroki is the winner of the UA Sports Festival!
Todoroki huffed a sigh as he was not sure how his words were going to be taken, but was glad that they seemed to have gotten through to the blonde. He wasn't expecting to win after declaring he didn't care for victory, but accepted the outcome as he turned to his father. The flame hero was also unsure of how to take this turn of events, and stood to take up his leave without making a sound. With that, the main part of the festival had come to an end. The slight breeze from the human grenade's movements was cool against his heating face, and there was nothing that was going to stop him now. Swinging open the door with a gas mask in hand, Bakugo hooked it over himself before marching right up to his friend's unconscious body.
What are you doing, Bakugo?
Aizawa stood up, confused and concerned for his student's actions, but respected the boy enough not to act. There was no one in the world who knew Izuku better than Bakugo, and even if it was upsetting to know that it didn't amount to much, they were going to be positive and work with what they had. Tension in the air thickened as Bakugo placed his friend's body onto a wheelchair.
Even if it's only a little, he's still progressing some of what's going on around him. I'm just going to show him that there's no point in hiding in that dumb shell of his, and come out to where people care for him.
Turning to face the door, which seemed so far away, Bakugo took off his gas mask, despite the concerned look on his homeroom teacher's face, and started to walk forward, pushing his friend with him.
Izuku is the kindest person you will ever fucking meet, and there's no way in the name of All Might am I going to let him forget that.
The wheelchair pushed forward, and the people in the room could feel the very air moving as Izuku was slowly pushed forward. A book happened to fall and open the window latch, letting wind blow in and clearing the room of the high gas concentrations back to safe levels. Aizawa opened the door to let them pass more easily, and Bakugo grinned, gripping the wheelchair handles and headed towards the stadium.
It's too bad you're out of it, Izuku. You could have clapped for me. I got second, but that's fine. I'll grab first when you're back, so hurry up, would ya?
The award ceremony went without any problems, and the day came to an end. Mitsuki came to pick up the boys, and kept up her wide smile when her son explained the situation. She, like many others who cared for Izuku's well-being, were always more than happy to step forward and help him whenever they could. It was just unfortunate that they could only do so much. They could only get so close. By the time the next morning class came around, Bakugo was used to pushing the wheelchair around, and when he pushed his friend into the classroom, there was an immediate commotion. Those who knew got up from their seats to ask questions, while those who didn't looked on with an uneasy gaze. Noise filled the room, and things were about to take a hectic turn when Aizawa appeared behind them.
Take your seats.
They all sat down, and Aizawa began his explanation of what was to come. They were going to spend the rest of the day choosing a place to do their first internships, as well as making a large decision. They were going to design their hero names. The news caused ripples of excitement to flow through the class before Aizawa asked for their attention again.
Before midnight comes to take over this class, there is one more issue I need to address.
He turned towards his student who was still in the wheelchair, frozen in place behind Bakugo with glassy, unmoving eyes. His silent stare was unnerving and making some in the room uncomfortable, resulting in the homeroom teacher taking a deep sigh and explaining. Leaving out the more personal details, he explained to the class how Izuku was still somewhere behind his dead, doll-like body, but was unable to free himself. His quirk was still active, but the way to avoid it was not to be scared, to face the unknown. He made the comment that Izuku could still participate in all the activities and be treated as normal, and everyone nodded when the R-rated hero burst into the room. Names started buzzing within the minds of the students as some started to present theirs to the class. Midnight rejected some and accepted a couple, and everything was going fine. Lunchtime then rolled around, and as Bakugo was wheeling Izuku toward the lunch hall, All Might suddenly appeared before them with a large smile.
Young Bakugo, may I have a word with you? Young Izuku can come along too.
The blonde looked between the other friends and the teacher before deciding to go with the number one hero. Wheeling his friend inside first, All Might's voice suddenly became serious and spoke quietly.
This is a secret that must be kept in this room.
Thank you all for indulging in all this information so far. I hope you enjoyed it. Now there are a few things I'd like to go over before the video ends. First, if you're in the mood for some great storytelling, we the Celestials have got you covered. Our We the Celestials, My Hero Academia, and Naruto What If channels retell the story of their namesake's anime with a twist. Check it out if you're interested. Secondly, on behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details can be found in the description below. Lastly, if you're interested in what we do here at We the Celestials, then I'd like to extend an invitation to you to join the team. The only caveat being that we only accept members from 16 years and up to join our crew. You can sign up for whatever category fulfills your interest by joining the recruitment Discord using the link in the description below. We're always looking for new members to join us. Well, that's it for today's video. Thank you so much, and have a divine day.